Welcome, everybody, to the latest I4CP Next Practices weekly call. This is actually going to be the last call of 2023, so we've been looking forward to this one. We take December off and don't have Next Practices weekly sessions during the month of December. A lot of holidays going on, a lot of final planning for organizations going into the new budget year if your fiscal and calendar year align. So everyone's always very busy in December, and we are too, including planning the lineup for Next Practices Weekly for 2024, which I'll share a little bit more on in just a moment. If you've already introduced yourself there in the chat, thank you for doing that. I saw a little bit of debate about what the definition of the word chilly might mean. Of course, it's relative. This time of year in the Northern Hemisphere, at least, chilly can mean different things to different people. But let us know where you're joining from today, whether you're from your hometown, home office, or maybe you're on the road. I'm here in Rochester, New York, in Western New York, where we've had our first dusting of snow. Nothing too significant yet, though. If you're new to I4CP and new to Next Practices Weekly, we're the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. We're a human capital research firm. We study all areas of human resources. We do that through our quantitative surveys, where we look at what high-performance organizations are doing differently than their low-performing counterparts. We define high performance, you should see on the screen, using those four fairly standard factors. We'd like to tease out what practices, whether they're somewhat common best practices or more rare what we call next practices, what high-performance companies are doing differently than low performers. We conduct interviews. We do both quantitative and qualitative research. We've got an entire community of HR leaders as part of our boards, exchanges, and other groups. We are a member-based organization, so a special welcome to all the I4CP member companies represented on the call today. You see here just a small sample of the several hundred member organizations that are part of I4CP. So again, special welcome to members on the call. If you're not with a member company and would like to learn more, just go to i4cp.com. I think Zeta will be putting a link to that in the chat. You can learn more. Reach out to anyone at I4CP, and we'd be happy to talk to you about what membership entails. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and I'm not always the co-host of these sessions, but most of the time. So it's good to be with you all today. And today I am co-hosting with my colleague, Bethany Vogel. Good morning, Bethany.
Good morning.
Good to have you with us. You're going to be leading our conversation with our special guest in just a little bit. But before that, I have a few other quick announcements. As you see coming up, we've got some sessions already planned in January. We'll continue in the new year to have Next Practices Weekly be a weekly event every Thursday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. But you do need to register, again, to get this on your calendar for the new year. So again, that link will be put over in the chat. Register once. It's very convenient. Gets it on your calendar for the entire year. That way you'll have that reminder. You can choose to come every week. We love to have returning participants, returning folks joining us. Always nice to see those friendly names and faces week to week. But if you're busy, you'll at least have that reminder. We do record the sessions and make them available in a full recording archive. This goes back now several years. We started doing these sessions in 2020, early during the pandemic, as a sort of a pivot to more online venues. So we've got a pretty robust archive at this point with a lot of great guests, a lot of great topics covered. So if you miss any sessions in 2024, you can quickly get the recording a day or two later. Also wanted to note, coming up pretty soon in March, late March 2024, will be our Next Practices Now conference. This is an in-person event held in Scottsdale, Arizona at the Fairmont Princess. We've got a early bird registration deal where you can save $300 if you sign up by December 8th. So that date's coming up real soon. If you haven't signed up, sign up yourself, sign up your team. We do have organizations that use this as sort of a development opportunity for their senior HR leaders. So encourage you to consider doing that. Just go to i4cp.com/conference. There you can learn about the full lineup of outstanding speakers. We've got a great mix of CHROs, several CEOs that will be presenting this year, and of course, topics that range across all areas of human capital. Also wanted to note our most recent research, which is our study, Is HR Already Behind in the AI Revolution? If you go online, you can download the free brief. If you're a member, you can download the full report. And we have had a couple of sessions on some findings from this study as part of Next Practices Weekly. So again, those are available in the recording archive. You can download the slides, watch the recordings. This was a powerful study we did over the summer on generative AI in particular, and HR's sort of position where we're at with it. We're going to be doing a pulse survey, I think that launched just this morning, to update and get some fresh data from the second half of the year on this topic. So we'd encourage you to also visit i4cp.com. On the homepage. You should find a link to that pulse survey. We'd love to get some updated data on this topic since it's moving and changing so quickly. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Bethany to introduce our special guest today and help facilitate that conversation.
All right. Well, welcome, Roz. We're very excited to have you here. We know you've had an interesting career in HR. You've been at Honeywell, you've been at Ecolab, now you're at Thrivent. Can you tell us a little bit about your career journey and then also just a little bit about Thrivent and what you're doing at Thrivent?
Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to see you, Tom and Bethany. If you look up in the dictionary of somebody who had no plan, you'd see my picture in there because as an exchange student and an immigrant, I really didn't have a very clear career roadmap. So what that does for someone like that is that it allows you the openness to explore a whole lot of opportunities. So in my journey, I have worked in product marketing, I've worked in product development, I've worked in high tech, I've worked in utilities, professional services, chemicals, automation, and today I'm in financial services. All of it is a privilege and a blessing to be given those opportunities. And I've worked in various operations and talent development functions, a whole lot of learning responsibilities. All of that really has helped shape my view around how to move an organization forward, using talent and leadership and culture as key levers to drive organizations' success. Currently, I am the head of talent at Ecolab, at Thrivent. My gosh, I've been here 4 years and I still can't switch my language sometimes. So I'm really, really lucky to be able to have a fully integrated talent function, beginning from talent acquisition, obviously, to learning and development, to talent management, as well as org effectiveness, when it comes to workforce engagement, change management, and org design. A lot of those practices that really create an organizational environment where great talent can join us and can grow with the organization and propel the growth of our transformation journey. So that's kind of my journey here. I'm realizing I'm turning dark and I haven't even done anything to the lights here. But a little bit about Thrivent. We're a mutual aid organization that was formed over 100 years ago to come to the aid of people who are in need. So for over 100 years, we provide advice and financial services so that people can have financial clarity and to achieve their life's vision and priorities and fulfill their values. So through our advice, investments, insurance, banking, and generosity programs, we help our clients empower themselves and then lead lives of service and faith. So we're based in Minneapolis as well as Appleton, Wisconsin. And of course, then we have our financial advisors throughout the US. So that's a bit about Thrivent. And, as many financial services organizations, we're in the process of significant transformation to not only capture the market dynamics of, becoming a digital and agile organization, but very importantly, to become truly client-centric and be relevant, for generations to come. So in that context, that drives a lot of our talent and leadership development initiatives.
Interesting. So
Mhm.
I want to pause because I want to get into
Yeah,
Thrivent's leadership competency model and what you've been doing with it. I think you just opened the door for maybe why you're making some shifts and some changes. But I want to back up. So it sounds like you've had a lot of diverse experiences. Have those always been in like the HR realm, or you've been involved in like all parts of the business?
many parts of the business, to be
Okay.
honest. I began my career in HR, in the utilities industry, where
Okay.
I focused on training um, and leadership development, competency development. And, I joke that I started my career leading performance management practices and leadership development. And that's where I spend most of my time today.
Yeah.
So in between, I've worked predominantly in commercial side of the business, preparing the workforce to either be able to deploy new platforms, new capabilities, new products, to be able to serve clients and develop sales capabilities and sales leadership. And then to also be being able to build global collaborative initiatives to drive big organizational initiatives. So
Mm.
wide range of experiences. Very
Yeah,
fortunate.
yeah. So I'm curious if you have gone through that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And since we're talking about leadership competencies, I'm really curious, like from your experience, is there a moment in your career where you had an aha moment of like, oh my gosh, I am a leader
Yeah,
and my behavior matters, or like just something really interesting, like an interesting learning moment that you had as a leader? What
you
was
know,
that?
that is such an interesting question because you're forcing me to think about how I kind of pivoted. I went to
Mm,
school for many years, right? So those of us who invest a lot in advanced education tend to think of ourselves as deep practitioners. So I remember the first time I was approached by my leader to step into a leadership role, and I remember deep resistance of, oh, I don't want to be one of those. I want to be an
mm,
expert in my space. Um, and it took a good friend of mine who was a colleague who says, but you lead already. And it was a stark moment when I realized, "Oh, what are you talking about? I am a technical expert. I don't want to be a manager. And the feedback is, but you don't understand, you already lead. And so that was probably the first moment when I realized that leadership is not a job. It's just, you know, your ability to bring the full force of your vision and your passion and your talent to drive work forward, and to influence colleagues to come along on the same journey. So that's probably the first time ever when I realized, ironically, I study leadership as a subject. And when I realized that, you don't have to be a manager to lead. Um, I would say the biggest lessons I've learned for how to lead, honestly, is for many years I worked with community arts organizations, and when you are leading a community organization, you're leading volunteers, and people come with a great deal of passion, and they could be quite volatile, right? Because they're donating their time, treasures, and talent. And what would it take for them to choose to spend their resources and their time in a community initiative when they too have a vision for how things need to go, and they're not always the same? So what would it take for you to rally very diverse populations, so to speak? Because we would activate dozens and sometimes hundreds of community members to drive our key initiatives and drive funding and drive big projects and so on. So this idea about enlisting volunteers and channeling their passion and their energy and, take everyone's personal interest and harness that towards a shared vision and the common good. Those are some powerful experiences that really have allowed me to be able to lead. I've led sizable teams, I've led very small teams, and in all cases, to be able to get big, complex global initiatives done, it takes hundreds of folks, right? That they don't necessarily work for you, but they choose to contribute. So I would say, today we teach leaders to re-enroll their employees, to re-engage and re-recruit your best talent. We say those things, but I was really fortunate that I learned how to lead through leading volunteers, and those are powerful mindsets and skills.
Nice connection there, Roz, with community leadership, and I love the mention of re-recruiting, re-onboarding. We hear more and more about rallying people's passions. I just wanted to jump in here and say two just quick logistical things for the session. Folks, if you can keep your chat open, and please use that to engage with us, ask questions of our guests today as we're going along. There'll also be a couple of other moments, one poll and another chat moment towards the end, if we have time. So please do keep the chat open and keep that conversation going. And Roz, as we're going along, I know you've given me some slides here, so feel free to tell me when to advance as we go along in the conversation. But with that, I'll turn things back over to Bethany.
Awesome. Well, okay, so I love how you are talking about leadership and the value of leadership and how you've gotten there. I know that Thrivent is adjusting and refreshing their leadership competency model. So at the heart of it, like, you are still re-engaging, re-recruiting, like getting people to choose to contribute, right? Like that is an aspect of leadership that's not changing. So what is changing, and why are you noting or diving in on those pieces?
Yeah. A few things really. The way that we look at leadership competencies, by the way, is, we look at behaviors, skills, mindset, attitudes that drive performance. Those of us who work in this space, there are very specific definitions, as in, these are work relevant skills versus your, deeply held beliefs or personality traits and so on. So we tend to focus on, what are we expecting of our leaders, of each other, to behave in a way that drives forward progress for the organization. So for us, coming out of the pandemic, it's just such an important moment to pivot with future of work, with, changing work dynamics and market expectations and client expectations. We just have this huge moment. Tom, if you would advance to the next slide, I shared some of these big trends that we're dealing with that is kind of giving us this clarity that we have a compelling opportunity to really drive an aligned set of leadership expectations forward. So on the next slide is really, we treated this moment as this opportunity to align and strengthen great leadership. If I listed a few key, factors that drove us to this work. But one thing that is really interesting for us is, because we're committing to hybrid, virtual, and flexible work, we have been able to attract a great deal of great talent, very senior leaders at all levels of the organization, individuals with great talent have joined us from all kinds of locations. And with that comes great skills, but also very divergent expectations of what good leadership looks like. So it gives us this moment to, really articulate what good looks like and how do we collectively reinforce a shared set of expectations. So that's what drove us to talk about, do we update our leadership competencies? I will say that we had a very compelling set of leadership expectations. We have not deviated from that. Instead, what we've done is kind of refreshed our expectations with more specificity, more behavior examples, and more relevant language to specifically address the moment of transformation requirements.
Mm. So is there a focus in on change and rapid change?
Actually, when you're driving transformation, this is a topic that, we can spend lots of time on that. In the moment of transformation, so many things are pulling it, at the same time that, when we articulate our leadership expectations, we literally find ourselves getting back to the basics of what it means to have a great vision, what it means to deliver actual outcomes, and what it means to deliver outcomes through our teams. So on the next slide, I brought a few examples to share with the colleagues on the phone here. We can dive deeper, we can go faster. Certainly every organization is somewhat different. The way that we articulate our leadership expectations, as you can see, it's a very straightforward set of accountabilities, which is deliver outcomes. Above all else, we must deliver on our strategic priorities, right? So that is the expectation. And then secondly, we very much recognize that, whether you're a senior leader or you're a frontline employee, deliver outcomes, you have to go get that done through teams, through working with each other, through rallying each other to a shared set of objectives. And then you can only rally the team when you yourself model the way. You yourself demonstrate courage, expertise, resilience, and trust in order to rally the team, in order to deliver enduring outcomes. So on the next slide, we filled out the specific competencies. We ended up with 9 competencies that we want the organization to collectively focus on. There are so many skills and competencies when it comes to leadership. But what we chose to do is to really focus on the few that are most critical for us to drive our growth at this particular moment. And, certainly we center around living our purpose and living our values. And then the 9 competencies in the inner circle there. So I can offer, just a few more examples, Bethany, if we have time, to show you how the leadership competency expresses itself in day-to-day behaviors.
Yeah, so I definitely want to get into that. I want to take a moment to just pause
Mhm.
and run a poll really quick. Let's see
Okay.
where the audience is at.
Yep.
Are they doing the same thing right now? I think it's really interesting, and I appreciate how you talked about there's a difference between like where we redid everything, and that's not what Thrivent is saying. Instead, they revised, they refreshed, they really honed in on making it specific and relevant to where you're at in the environment today and where your
Yeah.
goals are headed. So the poll should be up, and we're just wondering, what are you doing with your leadership competency model? Maybe you don't have one. Is it staying the same? Are you doing something similar to Thrivent? You're revising, refreshing. Maybe you're recently, or you're planning on updating it. You've recently updated it, or you're decommissioning it. So let's see what it says. Oh my goodness. We are like split
Quite a
4
mix.
ways.
Yeah,
Interesting.
quite a mix. No one
Yeah.
decommissioning the model, but besides that, pretty even results here between not having one at all, staying the same, intending to refresh maybe in the new year or soon after, or having recently done so, as you've done, Roz.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
fascinating. I mean,
super helpful just to see what's all going on. Isn't that interesting? Because when we began this work, I naturally reach out to colleagues, and what I
right,
found is a lot of organizations are going through a refresh because pandemic. That
right.
there's so many forces that are changing that it's quite understandable that organizations would want to refresh leadership expectations. But this data is really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, I work in the community at I4CP, so I get to talk with a lot of different organizations, and there really are a ton of companies that are really focusing on that revise and refresh
Mm-hmm.
thing. And it looks like, just based on this data of who's showed up and shared, it's about half of the organizations are doing it. And
Yeah.
like you said, we're really looking at a changing environment, shifting goals, and making that relevant to the workforce
Yeah.
in what that means today. So let's dive in. Tell us a little bit more about like some of the specifics and examples of what that looks like. And I see some of actually a lot of great questions coming in through the
Yeah.
chat, and we'll get to that in a second. A lot around like how did you go about building it? Did you do it internally? Did you do it externally? How are you starting to measure the success? How do you measure those? So we'll get into those in a moment. But yeah, dive into some specifics. Tell me some examples.
Sure. We have some examples in the slides, and Tom, we can just cruise through fairly quickly so that, because I too am very interested in the dialogue about some of these questions. So first of all, we do articulate that leadership is expectation for everyone, not just people leaders. And then secondly, let's on the next slide, we can look at, I can offer you some specificity around. So for deliver outcomes, for example, we articulated 3 critical competencies, and you can see the exact wording of how we express those expectations. So for example, plan and align work. At this point, we're very passionate we have very passionate colleagues, and people make extensive plans, but our ability to align across the organization is something that we're intentionally, spotlighting to make sure that, as each team makes its plans and moves things forward, other teams are also changing at the same time. So it's important for us to call out that align your work is as important as planning and executing your work. So that's just an example of how we're articulating at this moment what we're looking for. On the next slide, for example, what we did is we actually took a specific, every single competency. In this case, I use the make sound decision example. We curated behaviors, what more effective looks like, what less effective looks like. You could almost argue some of the less effective is really around, this is not good at all. But we're intentionally driving this continuum, this concept of continuum, because no human can be brilliant at all of these competencies. And we do some work well and we struggle with other work. So what we did is we took the specific stories and examples that came through the organization and kind of illustrated for our teams around, at different levels of the organization, what some of these behaviors look like, so that individuals and team members and leaders can look at that and say, in fact, Bethany, I've actually got really good feedback from our leaders to say these examples are so helpful because they literally live in my team. Some of these things we see on a day-to-day basis, so it becomes easy for us to spotlight what's going well and where we want to improve. So what we did is with every competency, we articulated this is what we mean, and we offered behavior examples of more effective and less effective. And from this, we built assessment tools, we built 70-20-10 development tools. And, Sandy, your question is, I'm catching it, that yes, it applies to all members of our team.
I think you just hit on something that is really, really important, and that is make it real.
Mm-hmm.
Make it real, like not this ethereal, like pie in the sky, as I like to call it, right? But what does this actually mean, and what does it look like for me? So,
Yeah.
how I'm really curious, how did you go about like developing this, creating it, finding these
Mhm.
examples? Who did you work with? Did you purchase it off the shelf? What did that look like?
hmm We took a fairly long period of time over, the whole process was over a year. Not because it's that much work, but because it takes a bit of time to make sure that we hear all the voices. So to answer your question about the how, we did engage with external partners to help us think it through. And then, Tom, on the next slide, I can show the colleagues here a bit of the process. Next one. Yeah, there we go. So we engaged our executive leadership team right away, so that every single one of them had one-on-one interviews with me, specifically to give me stories of what great looks like and where do you find the struggle, and what are the most important things that we need in the coming 2 to 3 to 5 years. So all of these are curated through specific stories. And then we reflected back for them to, yeah, I literally forced them to do a card sort exercise because they have so many expectations, right? We have to prioritize. And then we put it through 3 to 5 senior leaders at a time. We did dozens of focus groups where leaders get to really put their imprint on the work. We engaged our employee resource groups. We engaged, individuals from different divisions, different levels. All of that is to make sure that we land on competencies that are truly differentiating and critical at this moment. And then, so we didn't choose to buy something off the shelf. My organization, just like many organizations, has had the privilege of using existing frameworks. And sometimes they have staying power and sometimes they don't. So in our case, there is just so much pride in who we are and how we behave that we chose to do this work internally with support from our external SMEs and partners. But ultimately, we want this to speak native Thrivent. So that was, one of my key criteria is that, it's language that the organization can relate to. It's illustrated with stories that came through the organization. It's expectations that our leaders can easily articulate and coach. So we chose to build it from within. And I will tell you that it is the greatest development experience for my core team, who was, not only brought into these in really powerful conversations, but also had to study leadership. We really relied on very robust leadership literature, and my team literally had to validate and document, where do we find a particular definition of the competency that we're looking for, and how do we know that that actually drives positive impact on the business, on the team, on the talent, and so on. So a lot of work, a lot of time to travel that process.
Yeah, definitely the time factor there, Roz. Obviously, it was an iterative process, involved lots of people. I'm reminded of I think it's an African proverb about if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, if you want to go well, go with many others, that sort of thing. So it sounds like you involved a lot of different people in this process. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and it goes
also,
back to my volunteer days of leading volunteers, that people need the opportunity to influence. And the proverb that you referenced, Tom, was the body of work. It was the guiding principle back when I was at Ecolab, and we were building leadership development experiences from all around the world. We actually used that exact mantra to say we're going to go far together.
Good.
And then that's what building buy-in from the get-go is all about, that the people who have to make this come to life had the opportunity to shape it up front.
Yeah, so it'll feel authentic and real for each of them. I wanted to just touch on the sort of third column here, particularly the last bit there built into performance management and talent review templates, because several of the questions we've gotten in the chat are
Yeah.
about the employee and talent life cycle. One asked in general which areas are impacted. One asked specifically about succession management, so talent review, and then two asked about performance management. So several people interested in these topics. Can you say a little bit more about how you've integrated this leadership competency model, rebuild, refresh into all of these areas of talent?
Yeah, it's an ongoing body of work. So because we took the long journey, it gave us the opportunity for the team to build out all of the support mechanisms upfront. So, our performance management templates include, what you delivered for the organization and how you delivered the organization, right? So we actually see leadership competencies as part of your performance. So that is part of our performance conversation and is certainly part of our talent review conversation. But for those of you who specifically lead talent review succession planning exercises, we're not only looking at business results, leadership competencies, we also look at drive and ambition. We look at potential for accelerated growth. So it's not the singular dimension that we look at, but it's part of our assessment of a talent's leadership impact. When we look at the overall succession planning process.
That's really interesting. I think
Yeah.
you've called out just some really important pieces of how you've developed things. You said that stories are powerful. I think you also did a good job of like looking at the extremes, which is
Mm-hmm.
always an interesting process when you're creating something new, right? To
Yes.
look at the extremes, what's really, really good, what's really, really bad. And
Mm.
then you also focused in on prioritizing, right? I talked to somebody yesterday who was like, well, if you tell me that 99 things are important, you're effectively telling me nothing's important because
Right. 100%.
I've got to be able to prioritize. I've got to be able to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I do see a really interesting question from Laura in saying there's a strategic choice to see leadership as a competency for everyone, not
Mm-hmm.
just leaders of people, right? Can you
Yes.
share more about the trade-offs and the benefits that you see with that choice?
Yeah. I'm trying to think through the trade-off. You know, we're in the moment where so much of really important work is driven by very senior, very seasoned individuals. Um, some of that could be the industry of financial services, where you're just very senior experts, individual experts. They may or may not lead teams. But we're talking about your top lawyers, your actuaries, your engineers, your architects, and your um, very seasoned uh, individuals that literally are pillars of our core functions. So whether you lead teams, whether you lead large teams, it's not necessarily correlating to the size of your impact, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Um, so, when we look at leadership, we articulate this as your ability to move the organization forward. And whether you're um, leading a whole project team, whether you're leading a cross-functional initiative or just leading a really important body of work, we expect every individual to, be able to plan and align their work with their stakeholders, to be able to bring the right level of expertise. I saw somebody point out that bringing expertise is an interesting call out because we are an expertise specialist kind of industry. And you have to be really good at what you do. The way that we articulate expertise, for example, is expressed in this moment of our strategic horizon, that we not only want everyone to go deep on the body of work, but also to bring business acumen into the mix in how they express their expertise, and to bring a digital first mindset to every decision that we make. So, so if you carefully curate how we articulate these expectations, it literally has to apply to everyone.
Interesting. And I'm reminded of your story at the very beginning when you were approached to be a leader and somebody
Mm-hmm.
told you, you're already doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Right.
already a leader, right?
Right.
But what's fascinating about what you're talking about here is that this has to be able to apply to everyone. So how
Mm-hmm.
did you make the leadership competencies come to life? How did you make sure that it applied from all the way at the very top, all the way
Mm-hmm.
throughout the entire
Mm-hmm.
organization?
I don't know that I particularly found that to be challenging, to be honest. I think some of the behavior examples where we articulate, if you're leading self, these are some of the things we're looking for. If you're leading teams, those those demarcations feel a bit artificial sometimes to me. And I'm the one who like literally worked on penning every single line with my team. So some of that feels a bit artificial. So we actually invite, our workforce to travel across the entire page of every competency to really understand what are some really helpful behaviors for them to kind of just try it on for size.
Mm,
But beyond that, um, I haven't really encountered obstacles.
yeah. How are you measuring like the success of the adoption
Mm,
um, of this new model? So you're saying try it on for size. You've talked a little
hmm.
bit about how you're embedding it
Yeah,
in the different organization. What does success look like for you?
yeah. So success means, we have shared language, we have shared expectations. I literally have leaders who catch me in the hall to say, "Hey, the development guide, we just used it." Hey, half of my team are new leaders. This couldn't have come at a better time. A division of our organization recently had their summit where they brought several hundred colleagues together, and they had a leadership excellence award. I didn't even know about it. They put together a nomination process and a selection process to kind of celebrate peers for their leadership impact. It was the most brilliant thing. I was so privileged to witness how the whole award ceremony occurred, um, purely out of their own volition. And we're shamelessly stealing that whole construct to apply to other parts of the organization. So those are some of the very basic things that we look for. The ultimately we will look at, for example, our workforce engagement indicators. We will look at our, obviously business growth and success, workforce retention, and so on. So we can get into that conversation maybe on a different setting, that we're literally watching a lot of these core employee development, growth, and engagement questions move the dial over. We launched this spring of this year, and we're literally only 7 months in. We're watching, this broad adoption of the language, the expectations, the training programs, the opportunities that leaders are embedding into their engagement activities. It's just absolutely delightful to watch. Tom, if
Hmm.
you want to, if you don't mind, just advance a couple. So I just want to share with the team here, how we, back one. I just want to show the team here. When we launched our leadership competency framework, we, obviously mounted a campaign and tons of organizational awareness, but we taught the competencies, the definitions, the behaviors through stories. So Bethany mentioned, we curate a lot of stories. And what we did is, because we did so many focus groups, all of these stories are ripe for the picking. So my team actually worked with every leader to curate that specific story that illustrates a specific competency and a specific behavior. So when we launched it, these story videos become part of our e-learning program. They become part of our communication campaign. They're embedded into we have a monthly meeting planner set of materials for leaders to use. And then we'll continue to curate more leadership stories. So again, this is, a leadership competency model that's anchored in our own expectations, our own strategic priorities, and expressed in our own voices. It just has so much more stick-to-itness for the organization. And then on the next slide, Tom, as you can see, this work is not done. It's an ongoing process. What you see on some of these visuals, we're sharing with you that we launched it from the top. Our senior leader summit, the senior team literally spent multiple hours at it, working through what does it look like, and taking the self-assessment reflection tool, and we have coaching conversations, we have role plays, and they were all facilitated by their peers who were trained as leadership competency facilitators. So as many pieces as possible, we weave it together so that the entire organization feels like it's a cohesive adoption of this set of expectations. So on the next few slides, I can just walk you through some of the material that we literally curated as part of this whole year-long journey. So for example, we have interview guides, right? So if we have behavior-based interviews, then we pre-populate example questions that our leaders can use to be incorporated into their candidate interview process. We have on the next page, we have a whole bunch of training experiences available immediately. And, we have what we call Leadership Snapshot. It's a free self-reflection tool that you can also use for your team members and your colleagues. But more importantly, we have a leadership competency development guide. We have hands-on application workshops where literally folks go through this assessment and kind of practice on each other of how to discuss what you're doing well, where we could see more effective behaviors and things like that. And I will say, over time, all of our leadership programming will be integrating all of our leadership competencies. The biggest win for us on the training side is literally division leaders, department leaders, project leaders, and employee resource groups are sponsoring events where they add leadership competency training as part of their event. So we're just watching the growth and adoption in a very, very proactive and very organic way. On the next slide is just an example of what a development guide looks like. So for each competency, as you can see, we offer you behavior examples at different levels. And then we literally just take the 70-20-10 concept, and we have leaders help us curate what kind of on-the-job experiences you can leverage, what kind of partnership you can use. We use this for mentoring programs. We use this for development planning. Thrivent is also an organization that invests deeply in ongoing self-development. So we do have a rich library of resources, of learning resources that my team has curated for every competency. And then I mentioned the self-reflection tool on the next slide. Is just a quick snapshot. When we launched leadership competency for our senior leaders, we literally invited every leader to go through a self-reflection process of just kind of thinking about how often do I show up with these behaviors. The same tool is available for team members to kind of give feedback to their leaders, for each other. And then we offer conversation starters so that a leader can sit down and say, let's talk about what your towering strengths are and where would you like to be more effective and how can I help you come up with a plan to improve this particular area. So we build in all of these coaching and conversation tools. All of those had been tried and revised and tested. We had a lot of user design sessions to develop these tools so that leaders can say, oh, this is very confusing, or, what I really need, right? So we literally write scripts for leaders to try on some of these coaching conversations. So then over time, on the next slide, we've had in the last 7 months or so, we've had easily over 1,200 completions of this self-reflection, peer reflection, team member assessments, and so on. So that gives us the opportunity to look at kind of a heat map metaphor around where are we collectively showing up strong and where we might have collective patterns of needs. And then on the next slide is my absolute delight that, among all the things that we did to prepare for the launch and integration, the coolest thing is we were able to partner with our Total Rewards team to really integrate leadership competencies into our recognition platform. And I was just looking at the metrics last night in preparation for this conversation. Thrivent has a very strong recognition culture. Any given day, every hour, team members are recognizing each other. And you can see, folks are being recognized for delivering outcomes, for rallying the team. And we're literally looking at actually over 40,000 impressions just back and forth in the last 7 months, because a leader might recognize 10 team members on an initiative, or a peer might recognize, someone in a different division altogether. So all of this recognition and celebration just creates that much more awareness and ongoing repetition of our leadership expectations.
That's amazing. I keep looking at how you created a lot of really great resources for everybody, and you're looking at the utilization of that. But the way that you created these resources was you took it from stories and you shared those stories. And by sharing those stories, you have set the model and enabled people to make things their own. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That organic piece of it. So I really love how you've done that. That's a huge kind of lesson learned for me that I'm definitely going to take forward. I'm curious, what in our last couple of minutes, what are some lessons learned that you can share with us?
Yeah, I did a bit of reflection. I think if I asked my team this question, they would have a lot to say, because they lived through this whole year of working on all of these initiatives, all these projects, all these deliverables. One of my team members has a project list miles long, so to speak. So kudos to the core team that worked on this. So I would really just among talent leader colleagues here reflecting on, what does it take to build something that will stay? Because, if you start this work, how many people on my core team? Maybe half a dozen. And then we have then communications colleagues, right? Other folks that really, help us. But all of us worked on competencies that are beautiful slideware that don't actually go anywhere. So my number one mantra to the team is, when we launch this, it will be a non-event, right? Everybody has known about it. Everybody has had an opportunity to weigh in. I want people to say, finally, what took you so long? And that's exactly how that turned out. And to do that, instead of resistance, instead of saying, oh, HR is doing more HR stuff, right? I would just really celebrate the fact that take the time, to Tom's point earlier, don't go fast. This is not something that needs to go fast. Take the time to engage as many voices as possible and get your key influencers to become commissioned champions to drive this. I will honestly say every focus group, our leaders say, we've done this, why are we doing this again? And, how long is this going to last? And my answer is, well, it's going to last as long as we need it to, and I need you to help drive it, right? So we literally asked influencing leaders to be the champion to drive this. And I would say relevance matters. I would not do this work unless the organization is ready for it. I shared some of the key trends that got us to do this work. I would say meet your organization where it's at. Do this work when it's really relevant, and really prioritize, really make it something that speaks native to your own organization. And then rigor. Let's not forget that leadership is a body of work. So let's not just take some executive's random, oh, I want this, right? Really validate and truly work to curate the competencies that could be measured, that could be benchmarked, that could be trained, and so on and so forth. Nothing replaces rigor in our own body of work. And then just weave it everywhere, right? Like my mission is to make sure. There was a question flying by about how about new leaders, right? So we put it into onboarding, right? So my mission is to make sure that it's woven into every part of the organization, so there's no way to avoid it. And, that's a body of work that we continue to do. So if there was one word of advice for anyone who's doing this work, I would say plan for a multi-year journey. Don't plan for the launch. Plan for 2 years later, what does good look like? And that's how you're going to create enough mechanisms to drive staying power.
Well, very good. I need to jump in here and interrupt us because we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank you, Roz, for everything that you shared. You've been an outstanding guest today, including the drill down on so many of the tools and content pieces. Thank you, Bethany, for leading this conversation and being such a great partner as the three of us prepped for today. So thank you to you both. I wanted to note, for those that are particularly interested in this topic, if you're with an I4CP member organization, you have access to 6 or 7 exchange groups, which none other than Bethany is our core community manager and leader across those groups. The Leadership Development Exchange is one of those, and we're just now rolling out the schedule of meetings for these exchange groups in 2024. And we've already identified a topic that is very much aligned with the conversation today. As you see here, May 7th of next year, 12 o'clock Eastern time, unveiling new leadership frameworks and measuring business impact. So hopefully Roz can join that conversation and be part of that one. I know you're a leader in a lot of our communities, Roz, so appreciate your always leaning in. But we'll want to hear from other member organizations, find out what they're doing as well, maybe how it differs from some of the things you're doing at Thrivent. Also, just wanted to note these sessions, these Next Practice Weekly calls every week, are available for recertification credits for both HRCI and SHRM. So if you're an HR professional that has a certification and needs your recertification credit hours, if you attended today's session, just jot down the program ID or the activity ID where relevant, and you'll be able to do that. Once again, thanks everyone. This is our last session of the year. As we said earlier, you'll need to re-register for the calendar year for 2024. Hope to see everyone back in January. We'll have another great year of weekly Next Practices sessions. On behalf of Zeta, our partner across all these sessions week to week, Bethany and Roz, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Roz.